What are we talking about, Debbie? We are talking about procrastination. And today we're going to talk about your anger and procrastination. So, my question for you today is it possible that the anger that you're experiencing has something to do with you procrastinating? So, I'm going to give Debbie and I are going to give you some information to help you figure out the answer to that question. And we're going to give you the 6 different levels of anger that's important for you to know about. And then we're going to give you some golden nuggets in between. So stay with us. We're glad you're here. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. If we don't see them right now, we will come back and we will answer them. If you've got comments, if there are things, some thoughts that you have, make sure you put them in the comments. We love going back and looking and seeing, and you're important, and what you have to say is important to us. So I'm Pam McCloskey, also known as Coach Pamsky. I work with women who are coming from dysfunctional homes and situations, and I help them with the effects that they have from being in those situations. And so I have Pamsky's Place, a life learning center that promotes the 6 pillars of self care with Christian values. So I teach a lot about how to set boundaries, how to trust again. How do you build your self worth and overcome the imposter syndrome? What do you do to be able to overcome anger and some of the things that you experience from being in those kind of situations? So I'm glad you're here, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Debbie and let her introduce herself.
Well, thank you, Pam. So, my name is Debbie Dowling-Wahba, and I am the founder of Anxiously Overcoming, where I help women to learn how to manage, redirect, and cope with anxiety. As a person that's had anxiety for the majority of my adult life, I have learned how to manage it and get back to doing the things I love because I wasn't doing them. So, for me, it's all about helping others because I wish I had somebody that had helped me along the way. So I want to be that person for other people. So that is about me. And I'm going to turn it back to you so we can get this conversation started.
Yes, yes, this is going to be a good one. And I know I say that every week, but it's going to be a good one again. So I believe that all of us experience anger. At some point, there's things that triggers us, there's things that are going on, situations, and we can become angry about those situations. The very first thing I want to say before we even move into any of this is I want you to understand that there is nothing wrong with being angry. There was a time where I had huge anger issues. And so when I would get angry after I went through some healing, I thought that was bad. I'm thinking, "Oh, here it comes. I'm getting angry. This is bad." Well, even having that mindset can cause some things. But I really did believe I was afraid of myself when I would get angry because I used to react in not healthy ways at all. I broke a lot of glass, my poor husband, and I treated people in ways that I didn't, especially those who I love. I treated them in ways that just wasn't healthy, isn't the way I really wanted to treat them. And it even sometimes felt like I was out of control, that I couldn't even control what was going on inside of me and the way I was reacting. So, we're going to talk about some of that in this segment. But for the very first thing that I want you to know is that it is not bad for you to feel anger. We were created with that ability. We're supposed to feel angry at times. What happens a lot of the times is that we get stuck in some emotions, because anger is actually a secondary emotion. I don't know if you know that, but anger is a secondary emotion. There's always something that you're feeling first before you feel anger, and being able to identify that does help. But there are things that will create this feeling of anger, and you have to start thinking about, how do I react or respond when certain things happen? And when I feel anger, what am I doing? What kind of actions am I having? It's not the emotion, it's what you do with it that's important. So, as we get into this, I'm going to talk about the four sources of anger, and you're going to see where procrastination comes into this. Okay. So, the very first one is injustice. And I don't know about all of you, but I hate injustice. When I find things happening that is unjust, oh, do I get angry inside? And most of it is because I am a natural encourager. And when I see injustice, I often see people in states that is not encouraging, that is not beneficial, that's not healthy for them. And it creates this environment where they're suffering. And I hate injustice. And so for you, you may see things and feel that it's unjust or that things don't seem fair. Now, what I am going to say to this is that a lot of times that's according to our own perception, how we see things. We will determine whether it's unjust or not. So we do need to be a bit careful and be realistic with what we feel is unjust. But we also need to have this in us because there is injustice going on out there. There are children who are being taken from their families and trafficking, and there are people who are being abused, and there are animals. I know there's advocates for animals, and that's unjust when they're not being treated right. Things like that. So we are to have this built in us, but we do need to really evaluate, what do we believe is unjust, and is it really unjust, and why do we feel that way? So Debbie, what do you have to say about that?
Well, and I'm like you. I don't know that I'm so much as an encourager. I know that I am, but I come more of the side of, I just want to see, people be happy and succeed and be accepted for who they are, and not be discriminated against or have injustice done to them because of where they're from, or what skin color they are, or maybe they have a disability. So I'm with you on that. As far as, I get very angry with that, with
Mm.
seeing injustice. And sometimes it's hard, and you have to learn how to deal with that anger and where to place it. And I think that that's going to be a big part of our conversation, of identifying that injustice or that anger and knowing what to do with it. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the second one is hurt. Hurt is another source of anger. If you have been hurt, you may go through many different emotions, but anger is definitely going to be one of them. Think about when a loss happens. If you know anything about the stages of grief, you know that anger is a natural response to loss. And often when you're hurt, you're experiencing some kind of loss. And so as you are looking at, well, this person hurt me, whether it was with their words, with their actions, whatever it is, this person hurt me and I am angry about it. Is there anything wrong with that? No, again, there is nothing wrong. It's natural for us to feel that anger when we're hurt. Again, it's what we do with it and our reaction or response to it. And there are steps that you can take to make sure that you're responding to anger and not reacting to it. The next one is fear. Okay. Fear is a big source of our anger. If you are afraid of something, guess what your reaction's probably going to be? Anger, especially if it's right in front of you and it's in your face. It's like, if we have fear about something, fear of someone leaving us, and they leave us, what's going to happen to us? We're going to become angry. We may feel some of the other things first, but we will definitely feel anger. And you say, okay, so what's the problem? Well, the problem again is what we do with that. And when it comes to a loss and you feel anger, you have to be very careful that you don't allow yourself to stay stuck in that anger, because your body was not created to stay in heightened states that anger will cause. So, Debbie, passing the mic over to you.
Yeah, and you talk about hurt and fear, and I would say that the majority of my anger and where I had to learn how to control it was mostly out of hurt. Whether it be I was being directly hurt, what my children were being hurt. For me, that was the hardest anger for me to deal with because I mean, I would get so angry that things would come out of my mouth that normally don't come out of my mouth, and I would react in ways that normally I wouldn't react. And it was, it was almost like a switch went off, and I would get scared of myself because I was like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't think I could ever get that angry." But I've been in those places, and definitely more so from a hurt aspect than a fear. I can't even think of a time where fear made me angry. Well, maybe it just makes me angry that I'm fearful, but like I've never felt that intense anger as I felt when I'm hurt.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, I can say the same thing. I did not handle my anger well. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the understanding. My home growing up was very angry. It was a very angry environment. It was partially learned and partially me not having the tools that I needed and not even realizing I could do something different, because it is true, not as an excuse. And thankfully, I didn't use it as an excuse for real long, or else I wouldn't be where I am today. But when you grow up in a very intense, angry environment, you can walk away as an adult as that's just the way it is. And you believe that that's normal until you start getting out into the world, meeting other people who had different backgrounds than you, and start realizing, wait a minute, this might not be normal. And then you start asking, hopefully you start asking the questions of, well, what can I do to change this? Like, if this is not normal, then how do I change it? And if you don't have the tools and someone to help direct you, you can get stuck in that. You can feel like this is just the way it's going to be the rest of my life. But you have to reach out. You have to start searching for that help. Thankfully, you've got people like Debbie and I who you can reach out to, and we would be happy to help you. You can find out ways that we do that, the programs we have, the things that we offer. But we need that. But it's up to you to reach out, because I can't do that for you. I don't know that you're hurting if you don't reach out and say, hey, I grew up in a really angry home too. And I'm just now learning that this isn't normal. Or if you're stressed out and you're feeling a lot of anxiety, you can go to Debbie and say, hey, all this anger has caused a lot of stress and anxiety. I need help. Then you can reach out to her. But reach out. Don't allow yourself to be in this environment with that message that this is just the way it is and this is the way it's going to be the rest of my life, because it's not.
Yeah.
Not if you choose to do something about it.
And I think that that's the hardest thing for people to do in general is to ask for help, regardless of what it is. So, when you are hurting or you are coming from a dysfunctional home, or you are overwhelmed and stressed all the time, that is, that's the time to reach out, and we can help you and make it easier. And it's just, I know for myself it was really hard for me to ask for help, and it
Mhm.
still is, and I still struggle with it. But the point is, now that I do it and I talk about my feelings more, people understand me more now because I'm open.
Yes, one of the things that I realized was when I was needing help, but still isolated, still behind my walls, still protecting myself. What I was afraid of was rejection. I was afraid that if I reached out, I might be rejected. And I was rejected quite a bit in my life, and I didn't want that anymore. So to risk it, to step out of my comfort zone, to say, hey, I need help, made me vulnerable. And I was not comfortable with being vulnerable. I didn't want that rejection, so no one could reject me if I never reached out. But the problem was I stayed in that state then and nothing changed. So I had to get out of my comfort zone and say, okay, you know what? I really need help, and I will risk being rejected to get that help. And I can tell you, interesting story is that the one of the first times I reached out for help, they actually said no to me. They said no, but I didn't take no as the answer because in my heart, I knew they were the ones to help me. Now, part of the reason that that was happening was they were a male, I was a female. They had helped many females before, and there's this thing called transferency that happens that women can fall in love with the man if a man's helping them. They can fall in love with that man because that man is helping them, and he didn't want this to happen. So he said no. And I said, no, you don't understand. I need you to help me. And he's like, no. And I said, and it was one of those times, this was a big deal for me. For me to stand up for myself and not take no as an answer, which how often do you ever do that? I just knew in my heart he was the one to help me. And finally he said, look, this is why I'm saying no. But I think he saw I don't know if maybe he finally heard God telling him, or if I was like the lady in the Bible that went to the judge and just kept going until finally the judge got tired of her bugging him and he finally honored her request. I don't know. I would think it was probably the first because he was a godly man. But he finally said, look, yes, I will do this, but my wife needs to be here and we'll only do it for this period of time. And I said, great, good, thank you. Fight for what you need. Fight for what you know in your heart that is important for your health and your growth. Because, like I said, nobody else can fight for you. You have to take that step and you have to fight whatever it takes. And
Whatever.
that's it, whatever it takes. All right. So we're going to get into the fourth one where procrastination actually does come in, and that's frustration. You can have frustration and it turn into anger. And your frustration may be that you are not doing the things you said you were going to do. There may be things that you told yourself, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take care of that. You may have made your list and then the list goes out the door. And what happens to you? You start becoming angry because you're looking around and all these things need done and you haven't done them. You've disappointed yourself and now you're feeling the anger of your own hurt, because what happened is that you hurt yourself without realizing it. You created distrust in yourself, and here you are, it's causing anger. And as we talk about the steps in anger or the levels of anger, you're going to start to see that there actually comes a point where you lose control of yourself. So, what is the source of your anger? Is it because you're procrastinating? I'm going to tell you, I am having a 30-day beat procrastination challenge the beginning of September, and I want you to be there. If you procrastinate, you're going to want to be there because I am going to give you so much information, so much encouragement. We're going to have a community that will help you, and you can have a little task, a big task, or even no task at all if you want and you just want the information. But I encourage you to have some kind of task during this challenge because I want you to prove to yourself that you can trust yourself, that you can get these things done. Maybe you just need some encouragement. Maybe you need a community. Maybe you need the steps and the information. So make sure that you come sign up for the 30-day Beat Procrastination Challenge. It's a lot of fun. We have prizes, and it is a great way for you to get some of these things done that you keep having on your list, but never get around to it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk just a little bit about stress. A little bit. So, Debbie and I know a lot about stress. We have experienced stress in our lives. I know for me, I have created some of the stress in my life, and then there's been outside circumstances that have happened that has caused huge stress in my life. And what I like to do is when I'm coaching women and we're talking about stress, I'll talk about their stress cup because all of us have a stress cup in us. And a normal dose of stress would be about 4 ounces. And I always laugh at that because I think, yeah, my stress cup always has way more than 4 ounces. But here's the deal, your cup is a 12-ounce cup. Okay. And you got to start assessing where is the level of your stress in your cup. And in order to do that, you need to start thinking about what causes you stress. And I ask my clients, now I want you to write this out. And I actually have a whole workshop on anger, and I have a slide that as they name things out, the cup gets fuller and fuller and fuller and fuller. But let's talk about some things that do cause you stress. Kids, money, lack of, job, health. Maybe it's friends that are causing you stress, which you know what I'm going to say about that. You need to have boundaries. Uh, Maybe it is bills that are coming in. Maybe it's parents that are getting older and you have to care for them. There's lots of things that causes stress. And as each one of those are happening in your life, if you're not taking care of your stress, it starts to rise and rise and rise. And then you get to 12 ounces. Uh-oh. What happens when your 12-ounce cup is totally full and something catastrophic happens? It pours out, it blows up, you probably blow. So, what you want to try to do is you want to try to reduce that stress, right? But looking at the source is what's important. And when we talk about procrastination, guess what? It's one of the sources. It's one of the things that causes stress in our life because if we could keep putting certain things off, nobody else is doing it, right? And then what happens to you? You wake up one day and you see the dishes still aren't done. And you need to make dinner, or you're having company coming over, or your mother in law's coming, whatever it is, that just caused a whole lot of stress in your life. And what if you wouldn't have procrastinated the night before? What if you would have gotten the dishes done instead of sitting and watching Netflix? And don't get me wrong, I do totally believe in self care, but we overdo it at times when we're not doing self care, we're procrastinating, and then it causes all this stress in our life. Reduce the stress, happy life, right?
Right.
Debbie, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, you use the cup as an example, and I like to use the old-fashioned whistling tea kettles
Mhm.
because you have that little bit of stress, and so it's just at that beginning boil, and then it goes faster and faster and faster, and then when you get to the point where you just start whistling. So and the thing is, what we want to do is try to stop ourselves from getting to that, that whistling point. So there's different ways that we need to learn to manage our stress and to really just kind of ease our stress. And it may be setting boundaries with people. It may be setting boundaries even with your kids or whomever you need to set those boundaries with. But that definitely helps to cut down on your stress and to help you to manage it a little bit better.
Absolutely. And we are going to have a whole segment on boundaries and how to reduce anxiety with your boundaries. And just, where boundaries is a lot. There's a lot to boundaries, just like procrastination. Procrastination, actually, the reason I love having the challenge is because the information I give you in the emails is different. Pretty much different. Maybe I would say 85 to 90% different than what I do in the lives. So you're getting a double dose of really good information. And you say, well, why is there so much information? Because procrastination is just a symptom of something deeper going on. And so we address what all those different things could be. Plus, we give you tools and steps to be able to have action because nothing moves unless you move, right? So that you can have action into changing things so you're not procrastinating. Here's the deal about procrastination. You may not procrastinate in every area of your life. Maybe there's only certain areas of your life that you procrastinate. Or maybe you're someone that procrastinates, like your feet is in quicksand and you can't seem to get moving. This challenge is going to be for you because we address any kind of levels of procrastination that you might have. So make sure that you're a part of that. All right. Well, one of the things I do want to talk about here, real quick, is what does anger do to you? What are some of the effects of anger? And this is good because I want you to be able to see, all right, what is it? What do I look like? What's going on inside of me whenever I'm feeling anger? And first, the very first thing is, and we're going to get into this a little more when we talk about the levels of anger, but adrenaline rush.
Mhm.
Your body starts to automatically do certain things when you become angry. And you're going to get this rush of adrenaline. And there are things that you can do to help bring those chemicals back down to a normal state. But this is what I want to say with this. If you're someone who's angry often, your body is going to get affected by that because this adrenaline rush that happens and all the other chemicals that happen when you get angry, your body was not created to be at high levels like that all the time or often. And your body can start being affected. Your heart starts to race. When you get angry, do you feel your heart just pumping really fast? Do you feel your body temperature start to change? I get hot. Like it's kind of funny because when I say when I get angry, I get hot, I mean that in two ways. Actual temperature hot and ooh, am I hot? Ugh, I'm ready to blow. You have a lot of muscle tension. I hold it mostly here in my shoulders and my neck. But everything you'll feel if you pay attention, you will feel your body start to tense into almost like a ball. Like your fists are clenched, your teeth might be clenched. I want you to pay attention to these things when you can, because there is a point where you can't. And if you can start recognizing what is going on with yourself. Now, I want to stress this. We're going to talk about this a little more too, but I have some clients that they'll say, I know I don't get angry. I don't get angry. Hmm. You know what question I'll ask them is, do you get depressed? And they'll say, oh, yeah. And I said, do you realize that often depression is anger turned inward? Oh. Well, then I guess I get angry a lot. So yes, yes. Just understand that you're just doing something different with it. You're reacting different to it, and there's reasons for that than what some people do. I have been both ways. I have suppressed my anger and it came out as depression, and I have been so angry that I just lashed out and broke things and was physical. So just know, if you think that you don't become angry, I would double check that, because you probably have and just haven't recognized how you react to it. Feeling out of control, definitely. Crying. How many of you, when you become angry, when you start to feel that anger, your eyes just start to water and you start to cry, and it probably makes you angry that you're crying because you don't want to show that other person that you're angry, or even dispel any kind of emotion, because you're afraid that it's going to make you look weak. Because we often, when we see crying or see ourselves crying, we feel that we're weak at that moment, and you do not want that person to even get a sense of any weakness, and it makes you what? Angry, which could cause what? More crying. So it is that cycle, but I want you to know that is a normal reaction to anger. Some people, that's how they do react to it, is that they cry. So don't be too hard on yourself with that. Debbie, do you have something you want to say to that one?
Oh boy, yeah, because
I think so.
I know for me, and it makes a lot of sense with either you gonna keep it in or you're gonna let it out. And I know, when I'm in that moment and I get that angry and I can't control what comes out of my mouth or if I'm crying or whatever. At that moment, honestly, I don't care.
Mhm.
But afterwards, then I get angry at myself for reacting that way. But it was just in the moment. That's how I felt, and this is how it came out. So it's about learning and understanding yourself, and then being able to get to a place where even if you are angry, you deal with it. But then you're not angry that you were angry and how you handled the situation or reacted. And so it can be a vicious circle if you don't really learn how to manage it.
Absolutely. We can have a lot of shame in the way that we react to our anger, the things that we do. And maybe not in that moment, but when things start to cool down and we look at what we did or what we said, and it's like, oh man, that's not what I wanted to do. And that shame then can cause that cycle of anger again. Control, you can have self control. I'm going to say that again. You can have self control. It is learned, it is not natural all the time. Being aware of what's going on with you, looking at what are your signals, things that you need to watch out for, and where are you, what level are you at in your anger? Because there is a level where you cannot cognitively assess things anymore when you're angry. And we're going to talk about where that level is. But you have to make sure that you are assessing so that you can have that self control, because it is possible. And I'll tell you a story to help you understand that here in a little bit.
Well, I have a story about anger and not being able to cognitively process. My boys played soccer, and my one son was playing, and a parent from the other team said something really negative about my son. And when I said to her, "You like, what did you just say?" And she actually had the nerve to repeat it. I mean, she repeated what she said. Well, I was that kettle whistling just exploded on her. And to make the very long story short, I wound up having the entire row of parents ejected from the game because I wasn't leaving because she wasn't leaving, and I was like, "If I go, she goes," because I felt she wasn't promoting a positive environment, and for me, when I went to watch my boys play, I wanted to make it just a positive experience, and I know that sounds all wishy-washy or whatever, but they're the ones playing the game, and if they're gonna make a good pass or whatever, I'm gonna say that. If I see something they mess up on, I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut because they already know that they made a mistake. I don't
Mhm.
need to enforce, you bad pass or whatever. So yeah, so the long story short was I wound up getting the entire line of parents ejected from the game. But would I do that today? No, because I'm in a different place and I've learned how to kind of settle myself and think before I react versus and then be able to respond because I still probably would respond to what she said, but I would have handled it completely different now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good story. I'm gonna tell mine here in a little bit, because it definitely can help you understand that you can have self-control. It is possible. So maybe you get headaches all the time, maybe blurred vision, insomnia, maybe you can't sleep. Boy, I tell you what, when I can't sleep when I'm angry. I got to take care of things before I ever lay down because I know if I go to bed angry, I have the worst dream. First of all, it's hard for me to go to sleep because my mind's just racing. Then when I do fall asleep, I have the worst dreams, and it's not worth it. You deserve to have peace, so make sure that you're taking care of your anger before you get in that bed so that you can wake up with a better attitude. It's already behind you. You've already taken care of it. Let's move on. So don't lose sleep over anger. Compulsive eating can be another reaction to anger, and self medicating for sure, numbing yourself, trying to get away from all of those feelings that you don't want to touch, whether it's drinking, drugging, shopping. There's just so many things that we can use to try to numb ourselves from those emotions that we don't want to feel. But you need to look at, okay, what are you using to numb yourself? And what is the consequences of using that? How's it affecting your life and other people's?
Now, I want to point out because you said about self-medicating, and people automatically think that it's either alcohol, drugs in that realm. They don't realize that it can be eating, shopping. I mean, there's so many ways to self-medicate, and it doesn't pertain to just alcohol and drugs. So I just wanted to, point that out because a lot of people think, well, at least I don't do drugs and alcohol. No, but you're $30,000 in debt because you're dealing with your anger.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the brain for a minute because what we're about to get into, I need you to understand what happens to you when you become angry. So we talked about that adrenaline rush that you get. Well, there's when that starts to happen, and you have a few other chemicals that are rushing through your body. It's natural. It's you can actually become addicted to the rush that happens when you become angry. Thus, why anger can actually become a habit because you may be using it to self medicate. Ever think of that before? It's just like if you go out on the street to get drugs, those same drugs you can self produce in yourself. And when you become angry, those are some of the drugs that are rushing through you. So, my question to you first is going to be, are you using anger to get that rush? Is anger a habit for you? Because if that's why you're angry, if that's why you have a problem with anger and it's not just procrastinating, or maybe you procrastinate to produce the anger, to produce the numbing and that medicating, but is that a habit? It's a really good question to ask yourself because for some it is, and we need to admit that it is. And then we need to get help. But what happens is as those chemicals are rushing through you, you have your prefrontal cortex, which is your reasoning center. It's where you can do your thinking, your reasoning. And then in the mid of your brain is called the mid center of your brain, and it is actually where the pleasure center is. When you feel pleasure, that's where that's coming from. Well, when all these chemicals are rushing through you, there's actually what happens is like this wall comes up between your pleasure center and your prefrontal cortex. Uh oh. Yeah. All of a sudden you're not feeling pleasure anymore. You have that need of feeling better, and that need will start to drive you to go find ways to feel better. But guess what? Your prefrontal cortex is shut off. There's a wall between the mid center and the prefrontal cortex, which means your prefrontal cortex can't talk to your midbrain. It can't talk to your pleasure center. So here your pleasure center is screaming, "Hey, I'm angry. I'm angry. I need some relief. I need something that's going to make me feel better." And your prefrontal cortex can't reason and say, "Hey, you don't want to go shopping. You don't want to go spend money. You don't want to go in that chat room where those girls are, where you can get their attention, or those guys are, where you can get their attention." That's not happening. Your prefrontal cortex cannot reason with you. So, guess what happens? You have the tendency to start looking for some kind of pleasure. Okay. So that's how this all happens. So the question might be, well, what do we do to try to make sure we don't get to that point? Good question, because we're going to get to that right now. There are 6 levels, reactions, however you want to put it. I like to say both because there's certain things that we do at each one of these levels that helps us understand where are we when we're getting angry. It's like a thermometer. We use thermometers for many different reasons, but they're gauges that tell us what the temperature is. That's the way it should be with this. So pay attention, okay? You can have a level where you repress your anger, you withdraw, you turn anger inward, you deny that it's even happening. Uh oh, there's that denial again. You deny that it's even happening. I'm not really angry. I'm not angry. And you stuff it inside of you, you turn it inward. And what happens? Anger turned inward is what? Depression. Okay. So this is one level, and we all do it to a certain degree. Some of us do it so fast that we don't even recognize that that's what we're doing. Some of it is because we're trying really hard to have control. So, and I was notorious for this. After I worked through my anger, I got to a point where I would just say, "It's okay. It's okay. Something would happen. It's okay. It's okay." What was I doing? I was repressing it. And it did come out as depression in certain areas, or, and I shouldn't say or because there's an and there. I would do that for so long until my cup was so full, or I was the steaming pot, and I started whistling and I lost it. But it started out as a repression. Then there's the suppress. Okay. And you say, well, what's the difference? Well, listen to what this looks like. With repression, you don't really acknowledge anything's going on. You're in that denial. But suppression, you know something's going on. Like you're not denying it. You might admit that you're mad about stuff. You might criticize others, especially people who hurt you. You might become impatient. But with this one, you you start to realize it's here, but I'm not looking at it. It's still somewhat a form of denial, but you're reacting a little bit different to it. And it's like the next level. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not in full denial anymore, but are you suppressing? Are you repressing? Where are you at? Okay, so that's two. You ready for the next one? The next one is indignation. Oh, okay. What is that? It's that simmering anger. I can tell you that my cup, my 12-ounce cup, was not at 4 ounces. It usually rode about 10, 11 ounces at all times. Why? Because I wasn't taking care of things. If you know my past, you know I was abused growing up. You think that causes anger? Absolutely. Then I get out of my house, and what do? Because I didn't change anything, I ended up in an abusive relationship. Do you think that caused a lot of anger? Yes. But what did I do with that anger? I kept stuffing it because I wouldn't deal with the emotions. I wouldn't deal with the core issues, the core root of what was going on. So here I am. My cup was at 10, 11 ounces. It was always simmering. It was always there. I was always having this frustration and this, and bring it back to procrastination. Well, my goodness, if you have all this in you and then you don't do some things that you know you should get done or you want to get done, maybe you have dreams and goals and you never reach them. What does that do? It piles on top of your 10, 11 ounces.
Mhm.
And this is what happens to you, you know? And you're like, okay, well, how do I change that? Well, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Maybe at this point, you're usually feeling some contempt, disgust. You're disgusted with yourself, you're disgusted with other people, and what is the result? Because if you see what I'm doing, I'm telling you the degrees and I'm telling you what they look like, but then what's the result? You'll start justifying.
Mhm.
You'll start justifying your actions, justifying what you're doing. Well, if that person didn't hurt me, I wouldn't be so angry. I wouldn't have broke that glass. I wouldn't have done this. If that person wouldn't have said what they said. Hmm. So, Debbie, I'm going to pause here and give you a chance to talk about some of what I've given so far.
Oh my goodness, you've given so much information here. I think for me, I would suppress a lot because I knew it was going on, but I would suppress it rather than face it. And once I learned to face it, it definitely made a huge difference because when we keep suppressing it, not only do we get to the point where we boil over and then doesn't matter who's standing in front of you, they're the ones that made you that that one little percent that you needed to explode, and you take out everything that you've been suppressing on them and they didn't deserve it, and it could be the littlest thing they did, but that was just enough to push you over. And I think that when we deal with that and you suppress your feelings, it definitely, again, I'm going to say the hardest person for us to face is ourselves. The hardest person for us to say I'm sorry to is ourselves. So when you have to take a look at your feelings and you've suppressed them,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do, and it can be really difficult. But you think about it, and what would you tell somebody else if you saw that they were not dealing with a situation? Would you say to them, especially if it's a close person, would you say, you really need to look at it this way, or you really need to whatever they need to do? If you're going to do that for somebody else, why aren't you doing it for yourself? And that's the biggest thing is we tend to want to help others before we even help ourselves with anything. And we have to realize that we have to take care of ourselves first. Just like they say on the airplane, put the mask on you. Guess what? You need to put your mask on. You need to be able to face yourself first and get through it before you really should be out going and telling people what they should be doing. But I know it's easier to do because we never want to look at ourselves. We always want to look at, oh well, that's, they're better over there, they're worse off or whatever. So we justify why we're suppressing the feelings, which makes it even worse because then when you think about it, you're like, oh, I realized this a long time ago, and if I had just dealt with it then, what would things look like now? So that's what I wanted to add.
Mhm. Yeah, the truth is that there are some people who will focus on other people so that they don't have to focus on themselves. If they can put all their focus, all of their energy, all of their thoughts on somebody else, well, guess who they don't have to look at? Themselves. And so what we really need to do, if that is you, what you really need to do is stop looking at everybody else. And I know why you do it, because it takes a lot of energy to look at ourselves. It means that we have to be open and honest about ourselves. It means that we have to peel like an onion those layers and expose ourselves, and it seems like it will be too overwhelming. We feel like we won't be able to handle it. We don't like ourselves, so we don't even really want to go there. But if you don't go there, nothing's going to change. If you want something better, you're going to have to get in there and start working on yourself. And that starts with looking at yourself, looking at your behaviors, and not focusing on everybody else. Yeah, good point, Debbie. Good point. Love that. All right. So we have the next reaction, the next level. Here we go. This is when it starts to get like, all right, it's starting to happen. The wrath. Oh yeah, that's the burning anger, that desire to avenge. Now, when I say that, a lot of people would say, "Well, I'm not trying to be avengeful. I'm not trying to get revenge." Maybe not to a point where you recognize it, but it is a part of wrath. Like, have you ever in your head wanted somebody to hurt as much as you do because they hurt you? Not that you actually want to cause that much pain on them, but you're so angry that they hurt you that you just want them to understand how hurt you feel, that in your head, you want them to hurt like you do so that they'll understand. This is where we are. This is wrath. This starts to move from just a feeling to outward expressions. It's where I started to slam the cupboard doors, and everybody in the house knew I was angry. Why was I doing that? Well, I was escalating, and that's what's happening here is we're escalating, and I was getting to the point where I wanted the whole house to know that I was angry, but I wouldn't say it with my voice in any sensible way. I had to do it by banging the cupboard doors and slamming things down on the cupboard, on the counter. So, is that you? Be honest with yourself. The result of this is retaliation. You start to think of ways to retaliate. Now, that can be in many different degrees. I'm going to tell you, before you get to this point, this is about the point where you really want to go take some time out, go pause, get away from people, go in your bedroom. If you need to beat up a pillow, beat it up to get some of that out. We're going to talk about some of what you can do, but get away from people. And you say, yeah, but I can't get away from myself. Yep, you're right. You can't get away from yourself. But before you actually get to this level, the wrath level is when you need to start talking to yourself. You need to have things that can help either ground you, a box that you can look through to help bring you back to a more peaceful state. You need to do things before you get to this level, because once you get to the wrath, it just keeps escalating to a point where you have no control. And I'll show you what that looks like here.
That was me, the wrath. But yes, and
Oh,
hurt people hurt people.
yes.
So one and one thing, I thought of when you were talking about, people will say, "Oh, they don't have those thoughts." I'm going to say baloney
Yeah. Let's
because
call it out. Let's call it out.
if you tell me that you have never in your life been angry and wanted to do something to somebody because they hurt you, I am going to say you are lying. And you can think you're lying to me because you're not, because I already know, but you're lying to yourself. So
Right. Yeah, and that's denial. You're in denial. The
absolutely.
the number one thing that I'm going to tell you in anything, not just in anger, in procrastination, in some of the things that you're doing or not doing, I'm going to tell you the very first thing you need to do is get out of denial. And there's 7 forms of denial. And you are probably doing one of them. And I'm going to tell you, if you want a better life, get out of denial, because nothing moves, nothing happens, nothing changes as long as you're stuck in that denial. And maybe you don't even know you're stuck in denial. That's when you really need a friend where you can go to them and ask them, "Hey, is there some things in my life that I'm not seeing that's going on? Is there things about me that I just can't see because I live with myself every day? What do you see?" Now I'm going to tell you, the friend you go to, make sure it's a friend who's going to be honest with you. You don't want a rah-rah cheerleader that is just going to be, "Oh no, you're fine. You know that I don't see anything." No, you want someone that is actually going to say, "Well, since you asked, do you really want to know? Because I'm going to tell you something. Do not ask that question if you don't want the true answer."
Right.
You have to be in that place of really wanting to know, because if that person's honest with you and you're not ready for it, guess what you're going to do? You're going to get angry at them, and you're going to start defending yourself, and you're going to start feeling like they're criticizing you when you are the one who asked them that question. Do I Am I in denial in any way? And a friend who will be honest with you, and if you're ready, can actually be healing, because they can point out different areas in your life where maybe you are in denial, and they can say, "Yes, this is what I see." And I'm going to tell you, if you do get angry with them, again, pause, go away, think about what they said, and remember that they have your best interest at heart. You would not have gone to them if you didn't think they had your best interest at heart. So remember who they are and how much you love them. And you did ask the question. So what you need to do is ask yourself, is anything that they said true? And start evaluating that, because that's what's going to help you. Being defensive and being in denial is not going to get you where you want to be.
And I wanted to go back to what I was saying earlier about saying the fibbing. I think it's just actual human nature that when somebody does something to us, we want to do something back. I mean, look at kids, at little kids, and they're on a playground, and one takes the toy, and then somebody else comes up and takes the toy from them, and then you say to the child, like, "Why did you take their toy?" "Well, because they took mine." So, I mean, it goes back to like that young, like this is just something as humans
Mhm.
we do.
Absolutely. Then there's fury. Oh, yeah, this is a little bit more than wrath. This is fury. This is blazing or violent. violent feelings, like feeling very violent, feeling like you want to harm something, or even maybe you don't want to actually harm something, but you usually do when you're in this state, because you pound too hard, you throw things, something, you say things, and it hurts people. But it's that loss of sense. You cannot start to reason here. This is not where you don't wait to this point. You're past the point of being that wall was already up. It's high enough now that you cannot reason. And so the result of this is going to be destruction. There's go whatever you could be like the Tasmanian devil and just break and whirl things all over the place when you're in this state. And then the next one is rage. Rage is the highest state of anger that you can be in. It's violent. You lose all self control. You ever hear the word temporarily insane? That's what happens here. And the whole reason why is because what happens with the chemicals in your brain and that wall going up. Your prefrontal cortex, your reasoning, can't talk to the rest of the brain. And so the rest of the brain takes over and they're looking for what? Pleasure, some way to feel better. But the other thing that happens, the reason you're in this rage is you got all these chemicals going through you, the adrenaline. If you know anything about adrenaline, there are people who lift up cars because adrenaline was flowing through them. The strength that you have at a state like that is scary when you're angry because you're capable of doing things that you would never do in your sane mind when you're calm, when you're not angry. And the result of this really is temporary insanity. It is where you are impulsive, you are reacting for sure, very impulsive. And for me, it was the scariest state of them all. And I was in it a lot. I got to this point a lot. And I'm telling you, I could go from 0, where it just maybe not thinking I'm angry, to 10 like that. Just like that. And this is where you see red. If you ever hear me say that and you've ever been there, I don't even have to explain it. You know exactly what it means when you see red. That's what's going on here. I had 2 pit bulls. They were mixes. One was a boy, one was a girl. And one day, they got along great. But one day, it was a really bad day because one probably had simmering anger, because I think what was happening was the one would go to the other's bowl and eat from her bowl. And she one day wasn't going to take it anymore. That level started going up. She couldn't take it anymore. And she saw red. And it was a bloody mess. It was terrible. Bad experience. Don't allow yourself to get to this point. You and your loved ones deserve so much more than what you're going to do at this point. And I'm going to tell you right now that when you get to this point, you're probably totally past this. But I don't want you to think that you can't control yourself at all, because I'm going to tell you a very quick story. Because I was angry a lot, who do we hurt the most? The people in our family, right? I was having a day. I don't remember what was going on, but my stress level was high. Something else happened. The kids were younger. I don't know. Maybe they spilt the milk, whatever it was. And I lost it. And I'm screaming. At this point, we had just moved to a new state and we just purchased a mobile home. If you know anything about mobile homes, the walls are not thick, right? And in this mobile home, you had to go up the steps, cross the whole porch where there's a big glass window, and come to the door. I'm enraged. I am having a fit. I'm screaming in the top of my lungs, and there's a knock at the door. What do you think I did? Instantly, I got myself together and I went to the door. And it was a lady from my church. And I'm like, hi, acting like everything was okay. The reality is, there's no way she didn't hear me. No way. There is absolutely no way she didn't. You would have to be totally deaf not to hear me. She never said anything. I forget what she was there for. I think she was giving me something. And she didn't say anything and she left. To this day, we've never talked about it. She never said anything. I've never asked. But here I am in a rage and I instantly stop it. So I don't ever want to hear, and it was a reminder to myself, Pam, you act like you can't do something about this, but you can. You can. You don't have to be in that state. You can catch it at a point where you don't have to be. Now, I wasn't insane yet, so that because if I was, I that me answering the door probably would have been totally different. I probably wouldn't have answered the door. But just know that you can have that self-control and you can catch this before it gets to a point where you are so destructive that shame sets in later and then it causes more anger. Don't allow yourself to be in that cycle because you have the power to do things to eliminate this or to bring it down to a place where it's more manageable.
Yeah, and I think for me, in talking about those stages between wrath, fury, and rage, for me, I think I would go from wrath to rage. There was no fury in between. So it was a case of I went from, just here's my wrath, but rage. I mean, there was no fury.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would really actually, which was crazy for my kids and my family. Now, people outside my home didn't see my anger as much. I didn't really display it outside of myself until one day I did. And when I did, that's when I really got help because it was like, oh my, now I can't control myself even outside of my house. And that there were certain things going on that just it really scared me. And that's when I knew I need help. Like I can't do this by myself. But I would go from just, the repression, the lower level anger to fury and hit the top so quick. And it was so confusing for my kids because I was just fine. But I would get triggered. And my triggers, because I didn't understand triggers and didn't understand what you can do, didn't recognize what my triggers were, it would send me from 0 to 10 that quick. And when I began to learn and be able to have tools, I know my family, my husband especially, he was so thankful and he really saw a huge change in me. And people who know me today, it's hard for them to even imagine me being that angry because I'm a pretty fun loving. I take things in stride. I deal with my anger so I'm not at that level anymore. And if I see myself getting to that level, I know something triggered me that I use my tools. I do the self-talk. I do the things that I need to do to make sure that I'm not getting to those high levels and losing all conscience about what's going on. Yeah, it's definitely something that I think we need to be aware of, understand that it's not we don't have to be stuck in this. Like this does not have to be your life. If you're dealing with anger or experiencing, maybe I should say experiencing anger but don't know how to deal with it, please come talk to me because There are things that you can do. We don't have much time to get into what you can do, but I am going to tell you, I'm just going to give you a couple little secrets here. And I know Debbie will be in on this too about this one, is you need to know your triggers. You need to know what is setting you off, what is causing you, what is hitting your pain points, what's reminding you of maybe something you've gone through, something that you've been hiding, something that just makes your body remember. What is triggering you? Know what those are. Make sure that when you're starting to feel anger, not only are you acknowledging what's happening to you and how you're feeling, but maybe this is the point to call a friend and say, hey, can we talk? Because sometimes just having someone to talk to helps. Maybe it's that you need to go for a brisk walk. That is something that helps me a lot, is going for a brisk walk. I'll either go for a brisk walk or I'll clean my house. Both of them, you say, okay, why that? Go exercise, go to the gym. Whatever you do, it needs to be some kind of action that is going to help those chemicals dissipate faster. Because when you're not moving, they're going to stay longer. And it can take a while for those chemicals to come down to a even semi level normal level. But you can help it by doing things that's getting you moving fast to bring that down. Um, and again, having your support system, make sure that you have your support system. There is so much more we could talk about that we just don't really have time for right now. So we will come back to this topic again. And when we focus on it next time, it won't be next week, but when we get back into anger, we'll actually start more on, we may summarize some of this, but we'll get into more of the solutions because there's lots of things that you can do. But becoming aware is the number one thing that you have to do. Don't stay in denial about this.
Absolutely. Definitely, you have to know your triggers and know how to address them and figure out how you can handle things better so that you can respond and not react.
Absolutely. So, Debbie, before we go out, before we sign off, is there any ending things, something that you would like people to know, especially when it comes to the anxiety part of anger? Is there any last statements that you have?
Well, yeah, so anger can also come out in anxiety and it can cause you to, because when we have that adrenaline flow, somebody with anxiety, your body might perceive it different. So you might be angry, but your body's perceiving it as anxiety. And our body doesn't really know the difference. So you being able to distinguish between are you angry or are you anxious? And when you're angry, you want to deal with that anger because otherwise it could lead to the anxiety. So it kind of is a double-edged sword on that one. But when you know your triggers and you know how to manage what it is that is bothering you, and whether it's really a feeling of anger or is you're feeling anxiety when you're really angry, when you can identify that, it makes it easier to deal with it. So that's what I
Well,
wanted to
Debbie, I have a question for you because this
talk.
may be a question that some people have. How do you identify your triggers? What are some things that you can look out for? Some things that might help you understand what a trigger is and because if we need to identify them, how do we do that?
You need to pay attention to how you feel in certain situations. So maybe you're a person that you notice that when you get in crowds, you may start to feel like the walls are closing in. So being in a crowd might be a trigger for you. Maybe it's a simple thing like a dog, and every time a dog comes near, your body starts to have this reaction. You identified now, well, it's the dog. So you have to kind of know yourself, know your feelings, know your emotions, and know, well, this doesn't feel good. I have that pit in my stomach, and what is around, and look around for what it is that may be in your space that can be causing you that anxiety.
Yeah, that's really good. It's funny that you say dog because the other day I was taking watermelon rinds to my garden. And so my hands are full, and I have a chocolate lab on one. My neighbors on one side of me have a chocolate lab, and my neighbors on the other side have a chocolate lab. Well, the neighbors on this side, their dog often does come into our yard. She's a nice dog, except that we are having some problems with her with children. Okay. Well, it wasn't her. It was actually this one on this side who's much bigger. He's a male. Here I am with the rinds, and I'm walking, I'm almost to my garden, and here comes this big chocolate lab coming right for me, and I'm standing there. Now I've been bitten a couple times by dogs. I almost lost my hand over a dog. I don't necessarily fear dogs, but I do fear a dog that's big, that's just running
Coming at
for me.
you. Yeah.
And I froze. Like I froze because I started assessing, what is he going to do and what am I going to do? And the neighbor is yelling at him and telling me, he's friendly, he's friendly. Well, that don't mean anything to me because he doesn't know me, and he might be friendly with everybody else, but he doesn't know me. I don't know him, and I have no way to defend myself here unless I throw my rinds at him. And so I just stood there, and the her son ended up coming and getting well, I didn't just stand there. I stood there for a second, and then I thought maybe I should just keep doing what I was going to do. So I walked around my garden, was going to throw my rinds, and he was like jumping on me and sniffing my butt, and it's like, "You know what? This is very uncomfortable here," you know? And that's about the time the son came and got him, and she's "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and I didn't wanna say that's okay. I've learned not to say that's okay when it's not okay. Her
Mhm.
dog should not be running into my yard that way. You know, what if the kids are out? What if I'm terrified of dogs and it throws me into a panic? Whatever, it wasn't okay. So I just looked at her and smiled, and I don't know how she took it. And I just kept walking. I thought, I don't want to cause problems, but I also didn't like what happens.
Yeah.
So, and thankfully he didn't, I don't think he meant any harm. But yeah, things like that really they can be scary. They can
Exactly.
definitely be scary, and they can and that could have triggered me
Mhm.
because I have been bit twice, and one was pretty severe. So, but I do know that that can be one of my triggers.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you so much, Debbie. I love that. Thank you for being here. It's time for us to go. We look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, it's time to thrive while alive.
Bye.
Bye bye.